He had everything money could buy, but he was empty until a poor housemaid did what no rich woman ever dared to do. Michael Thompson had everything money could buy. At 35, he was the kind of man who turned heads wherever he went. Tall, handsome, wearing tailored suits, with a practiced smile that opened doors and hearts with equal ease. His name appeared in business magazines, society columns, gala events, and at dinners where only the untouchables had a seat. But inside that empire of glass and steel, something was broken. That night, he was having dinner with an international model at a restaurant where a single bottle of wine cost more than minimum wage. She was stunning. Green eyes, flawless skin, an easy laugh. But just one question made everything crumble inside him. "Do you have your own jet, or do you usually rent one?" Michael froze for a second. It wasn't the first time he'd heard something like that, but it was the casual, automatic tone that cut through him like a knife. "Why?" he asked, still trying to keep the smile. "Oh, nothing major. It's just that we go to Malibu a lot, sometimes Paris. If you have your own jet, it makes things easier." She laughed. He didn't. Dessert arrived, but Michael never touched his spoon. He didn't say another word. He just stared at that glass of wine as if he saw his own reflection in it. Alone, surrounded by fake glitter, loved for his bank account, not for who he truly was. Hours later, back at his penthouse on the 29th floor, he took off his jacket, loosened his tie, and sank into the couch like a man carrying the weight of the world. Outside, the city flickered in neon, but inside him, there was only darkness. "It's time to stop this," he murmured, alone, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, he called Mark, his best friend and business partner. They had coffee on the terrace overlooking the park, but Michael was restless. He fiddled with his phone, his watch, his cup, everything but his own emotions. "Man, I'm drained," Michael finally said. "I'm tired of being wanted for my bank balance. Nobody looks at me without calculating how much my time is worth." Mark looked at him seriously. "Then take a vacation. Go to Europe. Disappear for a while, I don't know." Michael cut him off, staring intently. "No, I'm really going to disappear. But here, in the city, my way." "What do you mean?" Mark frowned. Michael took a deep breath. "I'm going to live as a homeless man." Silence fell immediately. Mark stared at him as if he were listening to madness. "Are you out of your mind? This isn't a reality show, Michael. This is real life. You wouldn't last a day without air conditioning." "Maybe I need this. I need to know if someone can care about me, without knowing who I am." Mark tried to argue, laugh it off, make a joke. But Michael wasn't joking. 2 weeks later, Michael Thompson vanished from the news, from meetings, from dinners. He took a leave from the company, blocked his credit cards, sold the imported car, and left the penthouse with the bare minimum: a worn-out backpack, 3 changes of clothes, a water bottle, and 50 reais in loose change. That morning, he looked at himself in the mirror one last time. He shaved his beard, cut his hair with unsteady scissors, put on an old t-shirt, faded jeans, and a pair of torn sneakers he'd bought at a thrift store. The reflection was no longer that of a CEO. It was of an ordinary man, invisible to the elite. He took the subway to the end of the line, got off in a neighborhood in the East Side he didn't know. Streets full of potholes, graffitied walls, kids playing soccer barefoot, mothers shouting from windows. Nothing there resembled his old world. He walked for hours until he found an empty awning near a small neighborhood grocery store. He sat on the ground, leaned against his backpack, and watched life go by. Nobody noticed him. For the first time, Michael was just another face in the crowd. The sun set, and the cold night wind began to blow. His stomach growled, and the hard ground punished his back. A rat scurried past. The smell of frying oil mixed with garbage hung heavy in the air. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. but sleep never came. Is this what I chose? Is this what I wanted? He thought, curled up like a lost child. There, in the middle of the city, surrounded by strangers, for the first time in many years, Michael felt fear. Not of the world, but of himself, of not making it, of discovering that maybe, just maybe, he had never been anything more than the mask. But he didn't turn back. And on that cold sidewalk, the richest man many had ever known slept, alone, anonymous, free, or maybe for the first time, trapped in a truth he had always avoided. The sun hadn't yet broken through the buildings when Michael woke up. The concrete was damp, his body ached as if he'd been beaten, and his stomach growled with a desperation he had never felt before. The grimy jeans clung to his legs. His back felt stiff. The cold, dry morning air cut his throat like a blade. Across the street, life was beginning. Shopkeepers opening their stores, buses honking, children with backpacks walking by laughing, as if the sidewalk where he lay didn't exist. And in a way, it didn't. No one looked, no one saw, until she appeared. A woman in a navy blue uniform, hair pulled back in a tight bun, carrying a worn-out grocery bag with a faded logo. She looked to be around 30. Her face showed fatigue, but also a strange gentleness in that harsh setting. Michael pretended to be asleep, but she stopped. "Hey, sir?" He opened his eyes slowly, wary. She crouched down and pulled from the bag a French roll stuffed with mortadella, wrapped in a napkin, and a small bottle of water. "Are you hungry?" Michael hesitated. Pride bit at him, but hunger screamed louder. I'm fine," he muttered, trying to hold on to a dignity that no longer existed. "Here, take it. I already ate," she lied with a soft smile. "This is all that's left, and I hate wasting food." He accepted. His hands trembled. He couldn't tell if it was from the cold, the shame, or the gratitude. Maybe all three. "Thank you. Don't mention it. Everyone needs breakfast once in a while," she said, standing up. "My name's Emily." "Michael," he answered, almost without thinking. She nodded and hurried down the sidewalk. Michael watched her disappear into the crowd, the bag swinging from her arm, her steady stride, the navy blue uniform, Emily. In the days that followed, she showed up again, always at the same time, always with a second sandwich, a juice box, sometimes even a piece of fruit. "I cooked too much yesterday," she would say, as if offering an excuse to help without making it look like pity. Michael began to wait for her, not just for the food, but for her presence. It was strange, comforting. Emily didn't ask questions. She didn't want to know why he was on the street or where he came from. She just sat beside him, shared her meal, and talked as if they were old friends. She spoke of her son, Joshua, 6 years old, who loved dinosaurs and scribbled on the walls at home with crayons. She spoke of her mother, Donna Margaret, who was ill and stubborn, and she spoke of life with a kind of lightness that felt like pure resilience. "We don't have much, but we have faith. And faith holds everything together," she said one day, while he slowly chewed a slice of cornmeal cake she swore she had burned. But it tasted delicious. Michael listened. And the more he listened, the smaller he felt in front of this woman who did so much with so little. One afternoon, she came later than usual, out of breath, sweat beading on her forehead. "I thought you weren't coming today," he said, trying to sound casual, but betrayed by his anxiety. "The building had a plumbing issue. A pipe burst. I cleaned an entire floor by myself," she said, sitting down beside him on the sidewalk. "But I brought this." It was a lunchbox wrapped in a floral cloth. Rice, beans, a fried egg, and a banana. The kind of meal Michael had never imagined eating on the street. But there, in that moment, it was a banquet. "You shouldn't be doing this. You barely know me," he said honestly. She shrugged. "Sometimes it's better to help strangers. People you know, They expect something in return. Strangers just say thank you. Michael smiled, not knowing how to reply. Her words cut through him like few ever had. As the weeks passed, the routine continued. Michael could already recognize the scent of her cheap perfume, the sound of her footsteps, the way she fixed her bun when the wind messed it up. And even sleeping on cardboard, he started to feel alive. One day, she invited him to have coffee at her place. She said it was small but clean, that he could take a shower if he wanted. There's a spare pair of flip-flops at home that Joshua doesn't use anymore, she added with a timid smile. Michael didn't know what to say. His heart raced. It wasn't just an invitation. It was trust. It was a door opening. But along with the joy came guilt. He wasn't who she thought he was. He wasn't a lost man. He was a millionaire in disguise. And Emily was everything he had never had. That night, lying under the polluted city sky, Michael couldn't sleep. He stared at the paper bag with the remains of the food she had given him, remembering the smell of a home he had never been to, the voice that now echoed in his thoughts. She didn't want anything from him. Not status, not favors, not a private jet. She only offered. She only gave. He had never met anyone like her, and that was exactly what frightened him. Michael never imagined he would miss someone. Not like this, not in this way. He woke up before sunrise, bones aching, soul restless. He washed his face at the gas station faucet, straightened his worn-out clothes, and sat under the same awning just to wait for her. For Emily, the woman who brought more than food. She brought presence, laughter, conversation, humanity. Each day, she showed up with something new. A slice of cake, a funny story, a gentle scolding about how he needed to take care of his health. "You look too pale, you know that?" she'd say, handing him a ripe banana. That's what happens when you don't get enough vitamins and good conversation. He laughed. She laughed back. And for whole minutes, the world felt lighter. Over time, Michael started offering to help her. He carried the bucket, pushed the cleaning cart, waited outside buildings while she worked. It was strange, even ridiculous, if he stopped to think about it. A millionaire pushing around a mop and disinfectant in the outskirts of the city. But for the first time in his life, it made sense. There were no masks there, except his. And even so, it was as if she saw what no one else ever did. "Why are you always so willing to help?" she asked one day as the two of them shared a pastel on a park bench. "Because it's the best part of my day," he answered without hesitation. Emily lowered her eyes, unsure how to react, but she smiled. A small, genuine smile, the kind that warms you more than coffee. It was on a Saturday morning that the invitation came. Natural, easy, like everything else with her. "I'm leaving work early today, need to take care of my mom and Joshua. Want to come with me? Have some coffee at my place? Nothing fancy, but I've got toast with butter." Michael hesitated for 2 seconds, because of the lie, because of the shame. But the desire to be close to her won out. "I'd love to." Emily's house was simple but full of life. A small townhouse, peeling paint, floral curtains. In the yard, clothes swayed on a clothesline, and a skinny dog barked as they arrived. "Quiet, Mingao!" Emily shouted, pushing open the rusty gate. Michael stepped inside. It was like walking into another world, a world where nothing cost much, but everything had value. In the living room, children's drawings taped to the wall, a worn-out sofa covered with a blanket, and in the corner, a boy with big, curious eyes. "This is Joshua," Emily said proudly. "Hi," the boy replied with a crooked smile. "Are you the guy from the street that Mom helps?" Michael crouched down and extended his hand. "Yeah, but you can call me Michael." "Can I call you Uncle?" The question hit him like a stone in the chest. Michael swallowed hard. "Yes, Joshua, you can call me Uncle." The boy jumped into his arms without hesitation, as if he'd known him for years. Emily laughed at the scene, went to the kitchen, and came back with buttered toast and black coffee. "Sit down. I'll heat up some milk for Joshua. My mom's sleeping. She's not doing too well today." Michael looked around. Everything was so small, so modest, and so welcoming. More than any penthouse he had ever set foot in. He looked at the boy in his lap, the drawings on the wall, the smell of coffee, the sound of the pan in the kitchen, and felt something he couldn't name, a good tightness, a kind of peace. Joshua spoke up. "Uncle, are you going to live with us?" Michael froze. "What?" "'Cause you live on the street, right? But if you want, you can live here. I'll share my bed. Just don't snore too much." Emily overheard from the other room and shouted, laughing, "Joshua, kid, stop inviting people to live with us." "But Uncle's nice," he shot back, with the cruel spontaneity of honest children. Michael smiled, but inside, his stomach twisted. It was the first time in his life that someone wanted him just for him. Not for a bank account, not for prestige, for him. And he was lying. By late afternoon, Emily walked him to the corner. The sky was growing darker and the wind chilled his skin. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing his distant gaze. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated. "About how you and Joshua made me feel at home, even without knowing anything about me." She shrugged simply. "Sometimes we sense who someone really is, before we know the name, the story, all that." Michael looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to tell her the truth, to open his chest, to end the lie. But he was afraid, not of rejection, but of breaking something pure, of losing the only place where he felt whole. That night, he slept under the same awning, but his chest felt heavy. The lie was starting to suffocate him. He was in love, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid of losing what money could never buy. Michael left Emily's house with a light face, his heart full, almost forgetting the world he had left behind. He had spent the afternoon helping Joshua with homework and fixing the kitchen faucet with a borrowed screwdriver. Emily laughed at how he tightened everything the wrong way, and he laughed back, feeling that here, in this small corner of the world, he finally belonged. But peace didn't last long. Across the street, standing with his hands in his pockets and fury burning in his eyes, was Mark. "Found you," he said flatly. Michael froze, caught off guard. The shock was mutual. Mark looked different, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, tense. He must have been searching for days. "What are you doing here?" Michael asked cautiously. "That's my question." "You disappeared, dropped everything, and now I find out you're living out here in the projects, walking out of a maid's house with some kid calling you uncle?" Michael felt his blood boil. "Keep your voice down, Mark. It's not like that." "Not like that? Man, you've lost it. This was supposed to be just a social experiment, remember? Pretend to be poor, live on the streets. But now you're getting too deep. You're falling for her, aren't you?" Michael stayed silent. The silence was answer enough. Mark rubbed his face, impatient. "You need to tell her, now, before this turns into a disaster. She deserves to know who she's dealing with." Michael looked away. "I know. Then why haven't you?" "Because," he hesitated, "because I'm afraid, Mark. Afraid that once she knows who I am, she'll never look at me the same way again." Mark stared at him for a long moment, then shook his head. "It's too late, Michael. You've crossed a line, and someone's going to get hurt." The next day, Emily left work early. She was exhausted. Her mother had suffered a migraine attack, and Joshua had a fever. She stopped at the pharmacy and hurried down the sidewalk, worried. That's when she bumped into a man in a rush, speaking loudly on his phone. "Hey, watch it!" she complained. The man turned to apologize, but stared at her a second longer than necessary. "You're the woman living with Michael?" Emily frowned. "You know him?" Mark, without realizing, had already said too much. "Of course I do. I'm his best friend. Or I was, before he lost it and started pretending to be homeless to prove some crazy theory about true love." Emily froze. "What do you mean?" "Oh, he didn't tell you? He's a millionaire," Mark said distractedly, glancing back at his phone. "Owner of one of the biggest tech companies in the country, penthouse in Upper East Side. He's just playing poor because he lost faith in people. Anyway, if he's around, tell him we need to talk." But she wasn't listening anymore. The world went silent. Street noise vanished. The ground seemed to sink beneath her. Millionaire, fraud, playing poor. She gripped the bag in her hand so tightly the strap nearly tore. When Michael arrived at Emily's house that night, she was waiting at the gate, her face pale, her eyes red. "Come in," she said, her voice too calm, frighteningly calm. He stepped inside, confused. He noticed the living room was quiet. Joshua was asleep in his room. The kitchen light was off. "Did something happen?" "Yes," she said, staring at him. "You're going to tell me now, or keep lying." Michael froze. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the jet, the penthouse, the rich man who decided to play homeless to test if love still exists." Michael felt his heart stop. "Emily, Don't call me that." Her voice trembled. "I trusted you. I let my son call you uncle. I let you into my home. And were you laughing inside the whole time?" "I never laughed at you. Never." "Then why did you lie?" she exploded. "Why? For fun? For charity? Did you want to see how far the maid would go to help you? Was it a bet?" "No, it wasn't like that." He stepped closer, trying to take her hand. She pulled back as if he were a stranger. "You don't know what it's like to be used, Michael, to be looked at as pitiful, and now you've done the same to me as everyone else. You pretended, you deceived, you used me. I just wanted to know if it was possible, if someone could love me for who I truly am." "And you think love needs to be tested? Love isn't an experiment. Love is lived. It's given. It's trusted." She took a deep breath, tears now streaming uncontrollably. "Leave, Michael, before I start to hate you." He tried to speak, but she pointed to the door. "Go," and this time, he obeyed. He left without another word. He wandered the streets like a ghost. The same neighborhood, the same lampposts, the same sounds. But now, the world had no color. And Michael, with all the money still tucked away far from there, discovered he had lost the one thing he could never buy: Emily's trust. The pool water reflected New York's clear sky, but Michael saw no beauty in it. He was back in his penthouse, the same place where he once felt untouchable. Now everything looked like a cold showroom. The European designer furniture, the shelves of expensive wines, the soft Egyptian linen bed, everything screamed luxury. But all he could hear was silence, a silence that hurt. He opened the fridge, full of imported ingredients, but he wasn't hungry. He sat at the balcony table, panoramic view of the city in front of him, but he saw nothing. The world had been gray ever since Emily sent him away with his heart in pieces. He tried writing a letter. He tried calling. He didn't have the courage. On impulse, he asked his accountant to transfer a generous sum to Emily's account. She would never accept it, he knew. That's why he disguised it as anonymous help. 2 days later, the envelope came back. Inside, the check untouched, and a handwritten note. "You still don't understand anything." Michael stood still for minutes. Then he got up, crossed the hallway, opened the safe, pulled out another check, this time blank, and in front of Mark, who watched silently, wrote the amount, $1 million. "This is everything I thought defined me," he said, staring at his friend. And without hesitation, he tore the check into 4 pieces. Mark blinked, stunned. "You've lost your mind." "No," Michael replied, with a calm that was almost frightening. "For the first time, I think I'm sane." 2 days later, Emily heard soft knocks at the door. She peeked through the curtain. It was him, Michael. Hair messy, beard growing in, a backpack on his shoulders, and a bouquet of simple flowers in his hands. Daisies. He stood there, waiting. She didn't open. Minutes turned into hours. He didn't leave. By late afternoon, it was Donna Margaret, Emily's mother, who came to the door. She looked at that man, worn by the city, but clean in his intentions. "How long are you planning to stand there?" "As long as it takes," he answered. She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then opened the door. "Then come in. But here you eat rice and eggs and wash the dishes after. Got it?" Michael smiled. "That's all I need." In the days that followed, he did exactly as promised. He helped clean the yard, fixed the faucet that started dripping again, washed dishes, picked up medicine for Donna Margaret at the pharmacy, and even learned how to cook rice without burning the bottom of the pan. In the mornings, he walked Emily to the bus stop. In the afternoons, he helped sell snacks in the square. Coxinhas, sugar fritters, fresh juice. He discovered he had a talent for attracting customers with his charm. "Emily's coxinhas beat any fancy restaurant," he'd shout, making people laugh. The neighbors began to see him differently, as a man trying to change, trying to earn it. Joshua hugged him as if nothing had happened. Children forgive easily, not out of naivety, but out of purity. Emily still kept her distance, polite but cold. A heavy gaze, as if she still wasn't sure if he was real. One night after dinner, while Michael was drying the dishes, Donna Margaret sat at the table with him. "You know you hurt my daughter?" she said bluntly. Michael nodded, eyes down. "She's been lied to before. Promises, sweet words. You know how it is." "I know. That's why I tore the check. That's why I'm here, learning from you all what life never taught me." Donna Margaret studied him for a few seconds, then gave a faint smile. "The difference is, you stayed. The others disappeared." One afternoon, heavy rain poured down. Dish towels wouldn't dry, the power went out for an hour, and Joshua caught a cold. Michael spent the day by the boy's side, reading stories in a storyteller's voice, making faces that drew laughter even between sneezes. When Emily came home from work, tired and soaked, she found the scene. Her son asleep in Michael's arms, wrapped in his sweatshirt, while Michael softly hummed a made-up tune. She stood there, frozen, in silence. For the first time since the betrayal, she saw the man, not the imposter. But it still hurt. It was still hard. That night, she left a plate of food by Michael's makeshift bed, the living room couch. He thanked her, but didn't try to start a conversation. He knew that now. Wasn't the time for words. It was the time for constancy, for proving, not speaking. And for the first time, Michael understood the value of simple things. A cramped house, a child's laughter, a shared meal, a silence respected. He understood that love can't be bought, can't be forced. It has to be deserved. And he was willing to wait as long as it took to deserve Emily's gaze once again. Time passed without hurry. Simple days stacked up like bricks of a new life, built with patience and humility. Michael no longer asked when Emily would forgive him. He simply lived. He was present. He was consistent. He washed the dishes without complaint, woke up early to prepare Joshua's morning milk and coffee, decorated their food stand in the square with handwritten signs, and at night sat beside Donna Margaret to listen to her stories of when everything was still fields and bus fare cost 50 cents. This wasn't the world he came from, but strangely, It was the only one where he felt whole. It was on an ordinary afternoon, one of those when no one expects a twist, that Emily sat next to him on the steps of the yard. The sky glowed orange, and Joshua chased after a deflated soccer ball he'd gotten from a thrift shop. "You've changed," she said, without preamble. Michael, mid-bite into a slice of bread with butter, looked at her, surprised. "Really changed," she went on. "Not to please me. You changed because you wanted to, because you needed to." He didn't answer. He just listened. "I tried to hate you. I swear I did. But in the end, what stayed was the man who stayed even after I sent him away, who didn't run when there was no disguise left." She turned her face toward him, locking eyes. "Now you love me without lies, without fantasies, without masks." Michael's chest tightened. "And I love you too." The silence between them said more than any poem. She rested her head on his shoulder. He closed his eyes. At that moment, their story truly began. With forgiveness came building. Michael sold company shares, set-aside meetings, gala dinners, and empty events. He donated part of his fortune to social projects, many aimed at families living on the streets, but quietly, without headlines. With Emily, he opened a small neighborhood cafe, a family business where the seasoning was real and the service sincere. She ran the kitchen, he manned the register. Joshua filled the place with joy. The sign read, "Emily's Corner, Food with Truth." It became a meeting spot. Early mornings, buttered toast and coffee with milk. Lunchtime, fresh beans with steak and onions. At night, sugar fritters and stories told out loud. Michael learned how to cook, to sweep, to bargain with suppliers, and most importantly, to live. One day, Joshua came with a scribbled notebook page. "It's my school assignment." The theme was my family. Michael unfolded the paper and read, eyes misting over. "My family is small, but giant. There's my grandma who takes care of me, my mom, the best cook in the world, and Uncle Michael, who is now my dad in my heart." Emily, reading over his shoulder, smiled. Michael hugged the boy tightly. That was the day he knew. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The following week, during afternoon coffee, he pulled a small box from his pocket. Rustic wood, no logo. "I could buy any diamond ring," he said, nervous. "But that's not what I want to give you." He opened the box. Inside, a silver ring. Thin, delicate, handmade by a craftsman at the neighborhood fair. "I want to give you this, a symbol of everything I've learned with you. A love that's light, honest, and true." Emily didn't need to think. Yes. The wedding was held in their backyard. The chairs were borrowed, the decorations made with market flowers and satin ribbon. The live music was a friend with a guitar. Emily's dress was sewn by a neighbor. Michael's suit, simple but neatly pressed. The food, homemade, prepared by Donna Margaret and other women from the neighborhood. Rice, roasted chicken, potato salad with mayonnaise, dessert, flan. There was no ostentation, but there was what many millionaire weddings lack: truth. Joshua was the ring bearer. He carried them in a cardboard box, their names written in blue marker. And when Michael saw her walking toward him, with her simple dress and a smile full of stories, he knew he had won the only battle that mattered, the one of being himself. Months later, Emily enrolled in a technical course. She wanted to study, to grow, to show her son that dreams don't expire. Michael supported her in everything. He brought her coffee while she studied, helped with chores, and made sure she never forgot. She was the pillar of it all. Sometimes at night, after Joshua was asleep, they sat together on the hammock in the yard. There, swaying gently between smiles and confidences, they remembered the path that had brought them there. "You know what I love most about our story?" she asked. "What?" that it began with a lie, but ended with the truest love I've ever felt. Michael embraced her, heart light. And with you, I discovered that life only has value once we stop pretending. And so, without luxury, without private jets, without magazine covers, Michael, Emily, and Joshua built something rare, a true family. And you, have you ever lived a love that money can't buy? Comment, "Love without a price," and let's spread true love together. If this story touched you, hit the like button and subscribe. That way, we can share more real stories like this together.